My name is Stephanie Riley, 29 years old. I used to think I understood the shape of my life, its rhythm, its warmth, its small imperfections that made it feel real. But looking back now, I can see that what felt like stability was actually a thin layer of frost, covering something rotten underneath, and it was already beginning to crack months before I dared to admit it. On the surface, everything about my marriage looked solid. Ryan, my husband of 5 years, had a stable job at a tech company and a reputation as the dependable, steady type. I worked from home as a freelance writer, juggling deadlines with diaper changes and afternoon cartoons, absorbing the sound of our 3-year-old son's laughter like it was a second heartbeat. That was our little world, or at least, the world I believed we were sharing. But the first fracture came quietly. It happened on a Tuesday of all days. Lauren, my best friend since high school, and someone who knows me better than anyone, called out of the blue. Lauren wasn't dramatic. She wasn't bored or meddling. She was perceptive to a fault, the type who could read a room in 2 seconds. So when she began the conversation with a hesitant question, "Hey, Steph, do you know a girl named Leah?" Something inside me shifted. I told her no. Wrong answer, apparently. Lauren went on, voice tight with the care as she takes when she knows bad news might be coming. Leah, mid-20s, new to the company, recently assigned to Ryan's team. Nothing strange there. Until Lauren described how she'd been seeing them everywhere together, lunches in his car, walks to the coffee shop, conversations that looked a little too private to be casual workplace chatter. At first, I dismissed it. I had to. I didn't want to be that wife, paranoid, insecure, grasping at shadows. Ryan had always been warm, honest, and present. If something was off, surely I would feel it. I convinced myself that Lauren was just worried on my behalf, that maybe this new girl was just clingy or overly friendly. But then Lauren said something that burrowed deep into my mind, so deep I couldn't shake it loose. It's not that they're friendly, it's the way she looks at him, like she knows something. That night, after Caleb was asleep and the quiet of the house wrapped around us, I casually brought it up to Ryan. Nothing accusatory, just a simple question about someone new on his team. He didn't look startled, didn't act defensive, just said, "Oh, Leah, she's fine." Leans on me a lot since she's new. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the phrase "leans on me" stuck to my ribs like a bone I couldn't swallow. I wanted to believe him. I tried to believe him, because the alternative was terrifyingly destabilizing, the idea that the man I built a life with might be slipping into someone else's orbit without me noticing. And then, as if fate wanted to prove a point, Lauren texted again the next day. Just saw them leave the office together, separate cars, but Steph, she was laughing and touching his arm. I remember sitting on the couch, the glow of my phone burning through my stomach. I tried brushing it off again. Told myself Leah was probably too friendly. Told myself Lauren might be connecting dots that didn't exist. Told myself Ryan had never given me a reason to distrust him. But that seed had already been planted earlier, and now it was sprouting. A few days later, the thing I'd been trying to ignore walked right into my home in the form of a thank you card from Leah. Innocent enough until I read it. "Thanks for being such an amazing mentor. I don't know what I would do without your guidance, hearts." A smiley face and a heart. I stared at that heart for a long time. I told myself it was immature office behavior, nothing more. But my breath wouldn't steady. When I asked Ryan about it, he brushed it off with an easy shrug. "She's just being nice." He didn't even meet my eyes for more than a second. Just kept tidying up Caleb's toys like it didn't matter. But it mattered to me, because something in that message felt intimate. Something about Ryan's casual response felt too smooth, too pre-rehearsed. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. The strange thing was that Ryan wasn't acting suspicious in the classic ways. No hiding his phone, no sudden mood shifts, no obvious lies. If anything, he seemed lighter, happier. Work stress had supposedly been improving. The big project he'd mentioned for weeks was finally wrapping up, so he was enjoying a bit of relief. But a happy husband doesn't automatically equal an honest one. One evening, I watched him laughing while Caleb tried to feed him a plastic dinosaur. Ryan looked so normal, warm, present, relaxed, that the guilt of my suspicions hit me hard. I felt ridiculous for doubting him. And yet, that tension in my chest never left. It didn't fade. It grew. There was a subtle change in the air around us, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. I'd catch him staring at his phone a second too long, even if he wasn't hiding it. Or I'd notice how he seemed overly calm when I mentioned Lauren's name, like he was trying not to react. It was all small things, tiny things. But together they formed a pattern I couldn't unsee. And deep down beneath the fear and the doubt, a quiet truth whispered at the edge of my mind. This isn't the beginning of the story. This is the beginning of the end of the version you thought you were living. I just didn't know yet how deep the cracks went, or how devastating what lay beneath them would turn out to be. The morning Ryan told me about the team building retreat, something inside me went cold. He mentioned it casually while pouring cereal for Caleb as if it were just another minor scheduling update. 2 days out of town, he said. Whole team's going. He didn't look up when he said it, didn't check my face for a reaction. It was almost too casual, like he'd practiced saying it. Under normal circumstances, I would have believed him. I would have kissed him goodbye, told him to drive safe, and gone back to my writing deadlines. But these weren't normal circumstances. Not with Lauren's warning still echoing in my head. Not with that thank you card sitting in the drawer like an accusation. Not with that strange brightness in Ryan's eyes lately, the kind that didn't belong to me anymore. I smiled, nodded, wished him a good trip, and felt my stomach knot itself into something hard and sharp. Because it wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was dread. When the day of the retreat came, I watched him pack. He kept it simple, a duffel bag, a laptop, a couple of shirts. But there was one moment, one tiny moment that twisted the knife. He sprayed his cologne, not the one he wore every day, the other one, the expensive one he only wore on anniversaries, weddings, dates I planned. He didn't look at me when he used it, and that told me everything. As soon as he left the driveway, I rushed Caleb to my mom's house under the excuse of having work to focus on. My mom didn't ask questions she never does unless I ask for help. I kissed Caleb on the forehead, handed him his favorite stuffed bear, and walked back to my car, feeling like I was stepping into someone else's life. The moment Ryan's taillights were out of sight, I grabbed the rental keys from my bag, got into the car, and drove. I kept a safe distance behind him on the highway. Every mile made my heart beat louder. Every turn of his signal felt like a punch. I told myself 100 different things during that drive. Maybe he really is just going to a work retreat. Maybe I'm about to humiliate myself. Maybe Lauren misread everything. But beneath those hopeful lies was a quieter, truer voice. You already know. The hotel was 2 hours away, a glass and stone building with a corporate smile slapped onto it. I parked far enough that he wouldn't notice me if he glanced back. He walked inside with a confident ease, no luggage for a long trip, just that duffel bag slung over one shoulder. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my fingers hurt. 20 minutes later, she arrived. Leah. You didn't need to know her to recognize her. The way her smile beamed as she stepped out of her car. The way she fixed her hair before going inside. The way her posture softened, like she was walking towards someone she liked. Someone she expected. She wasn't carrying a laptop bag. She wasn't dressed professionally. She didn't look stressed about any team-building retreat. She walked inside like she belonged there. My legs were shaking when I went to the front desk. I forced myself to smile as I lied about needing a room close to my friends who checked in earlier. The receptionist didn't question it. People rarely question a woman who looks like she's trying not to cry. My room was directly across from theirs. The universe has a dark sense of humor. I sat inside, barely moving, barely breathing, waiting. Minutes dragged into hours. Every time footsteps passed in the hallway, I felt my heart leap into my throat. And then I heard it. Their door opening. I cracked mine open just enough to peek through. Ryan and Leah walked out together. She was laughing at something he said. He wasn't acting like a man on a work trip. He wasn't acting like a man who had anything to hide at all. He looked relaxed, at ease, like this wasn't the first time, like this was routine. They walked to the elevator side by side, not touching, but comfortable, too comfortable. I stood frozen in place long after the elevator swallowed them. That afternoon they returned carrying high-end shopping bags, designer logos I recognized instantly, because I'd once dreamed of owning something from those stores. Back when Ryan and I were budgeting for diapers and formula, Leah was glowing. You spoil me too much, she giggled, kissing him on the cheek before they disappeared into their room. I didn't breathe. I couldn't breathe. He had never bought me things like that. Not since our wedding. But here he was showering her with expensive gifts while I counted grocery coupons at home. The humiliation burned so fiercely I felt it radiating through my fingertips. I barely moved from my room the rest of the day. I knew that if I went into the hallway again, even for a second, my legs would carry me straight to their door and I would ruin everything. And I didn't want a confrontation fueled by blind rage. I wanted answers. Real answers. So I waited. Night came. I heard their door open again. Their voices were too clear through the walls, laughing, teasing, flirtatious. I pressed my palm against the cold surface and felt as if the room itself was closing in on me. And then the sounds changed. The laughter faded, the talking quieted, and then came the unmistakable rhythm of something I never wanted to hear. I covered my mouth, sinking onto the floor, letting tears blur the beige carpet beneath me. My chest felt too tight, too small for the pain inside it. But beneath everything, the heartbreak, the humiliation, the rage, another feeling grew. Clarity. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't dared consider before. Leah wasn't the whole secret. She wasn't even close. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a mistake. This was a man with a life I didn't know about, and I needed to find the rest of it. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed with the curtains drawn, staring into the dark, listening to the muffled sounds through the wall until silence finally replaced them. But even when the hallway fell quiet, my mind didn't. There was something about the way Ryan behaved with Leah, comfortable, practiced, almost relieved, that gnawed at me. It didn't feel like the rush of a new affair. It felt settled, like she wasn't the beginning. She was a symptom. Something deeper was underneath, something older. By sunrise, my body felt hollow, but my instincts were sharper than they'd ever been. I knew Ryan well enough to recognize when he was improvising and when he was following a pattern. This wasn't improvisation. When he left the hotel early that morning, I followed again. This time he didn't know I was there, and I was determined to see the truth he didn't want me to find. For the first hour of the drive, he stayed on the main highway toward home. I almost let myself believe he'd go straight to work, that maybe Leah was a one-night mistake that spiraled. But halfway there, he took an exit. A quiet one. A residential neighborhood, calm and unremarkable, tree-lined streets, modest single-story homes, mailboxes decorated for spring. The kind of place where families wave to their neighbors while watering their lawns. I hung back 3 houses behind engine off, watching as Ryan pulled into a driveway like it belonged to him. He got out of his car. He didn't look around. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the front door. A woman opened it before he could even knock. She was holding a toddler. A boy. A little boy who lit up the second he saw Ryan. "Daddy," he squealed, reaching toward him with small hands. Ryan smiled. A soft, familiar smile, the same one he used when Caleb ran into his arms. And then he leaned forward, kissed the woman on the cheek, kissed the boy on the forehead, and walked inside. The woman closed the door behind them, shutting me out of a world I was never supposed to see. The breath left my body. It felt like someone had pulled the ground out from beneath me, and I'd fallen straight into a void. I wish I could say I moved. I didn't. I sat in my car for what must have been 20 minutes, staring at that door like a ghost, trying to will itself back into a life it no longer belonged to. The boy, he couldn't have been more than 2 or 3. He had dark brown eyes, exactly like Ryan's. Eyes so unmistakable, it hurt to look at them. He had Ryan's nose too, Ryan's smile, Ryan's warmth. It was like staring at a parallel version of Caleb, one that lived in a different house with a different mother in a different life Ryan built behind my back. The woman was pretty, but not intimidatingly so. She looked normal, familiar in a way women look when they've lived through exhaustion and love and groceries and laundry and years of sharing a home with someone. Her name floated back to me from something Lauren once mentioned in passing Emily, a coworker from years ago. I never thought anything of it. Now I couldn't stop thinking about her. Was she the beginning? Was she the original lie? Was Leah just something layered on top of a betrayal I never saw coming? I felt sick. Completely, utterly sick. Time slipped away. At some point, the front door opened. I ducked down instinctively, peering through the crack between the dashboard and the steering wheel. The little boy ran out first, clutching a toy truck, giggling as he raced toward the small patch of grass in front of the porch. Ryan followed behind him, laughing softly. Emily came next, leaning against the railing, watching them with affectionate eyes. They looked like a family. They looked practiced, comfortable, happy in a way Ryan hadn't seemed with me in months. I watched in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Every laugh from that boy cut through me. Every glance between Ryan and Emily scraped another piece of my trust away. My son Caleb, our son, was at my mother's house at that moment, waiting for a father who was here living an entirely different life. That realization shattered something inside me so cleanly I felt the break. Eventually, Ryan kissed Emily goodbye, hugged the boy tight, and walked back to his car. I slid lower in my seat, holding my breath, muscles trembling as his car rolled past mine. He didn't see me. Of course he didn't. He never expects me to look anywhere except where he tells me to. Only after he disappeared around the corner did I start my car. But I didn't follow him this time. I didn't need to. I had seen enough. I drove home on autopilot, tears blurring the road, my mind a chaotic storm images, overlapping questions, multiplying fear, mixing with fury. Every mile sharpened a new realization. Leah wasn't the heart of the secret. She was leverage, a bargaining chip. Emily. Emily was history. Emily was a foundation. Emily was the one he couldn't let go. And the boy. The boy was the anchor. The one thing you can never hide without leaving a trail of guilt behind. When I got home, I put Caleb down for a nap and sank onto the couch like my bones had turned to dust. I didn't cry. Not then. I stared at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything settle onto my chest. How long? How many holidays? How many nights had Ryan kissed me goodnight after spending the day with them? Was I ever really his only family? Every question was a stab. Every memory felt like a lie. But beneath the grief, anger began to rise. It warmed my blood, steadied my shaking hands, pulled my spine straight. Because now I knew what I was up against. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't insecurity. This wasn't paranoia. This was a man who had built two lives, one with me and one with someone else, and assumed he'd get away with both forever. But he wouldn't. Not anymore. Because now I wasn't stumbling in the dark. Now I had direction. Now I had purpose. Now I was going to find everything he tried to bury. ChatGPT said, Lauren called me the next morning completely unaware of how my world had caved in the day before. She just wanted to check in, her voice warm and casual, until she mentioned something that made every muscle in my body go rigid. Hey, Steph, this is random, but I remembered something. A while ago, I overheard Ryan talking to someone about a storage unit. He sounded weird about it. I don't know why, but it just popped into my head. Maybe you should look into it. A storage unit. It was like someone had handed me a missing puzzle piece without knowing the picture I was assembling. My pulse quickened. My palms went cold. Because men with nothing to hide don't stash things in storage units their wives don't know about. I thanked her with a calmness I did not feel. The moment the call ended, I began searching the house. I checked the kitchen junk drawer. Nothing. His bedside table. Nothing. The home office desk. Nothing but neatly organized cables and invoices. But Ryan was predictable in certain ways. He liked to keep important things where he believed I'd never look, not because he thought I was stupid, but because he thought I trusted him too much to pry. That thought alone made my throat tighten. Finally, I opened his sock drawer. It was ridiculous, even cliché, but something told me to check the small wooden box he kept buried underneath neatly rolled pairs of socks. Inside were cufflinks and a small brass key. I stared at it, my breath unsteady. This was it. This was the thing Lauren's memory had been pointing me toward. And I wasn't ready, but I needed to be. The storage facility was only a 10-minute drive from our house. I recognized it as one of those cheap places you pass without ever thinking about. Rows of identical metal doors, security cameras, gravel crunching under your tires like bones. The key felt heavy in my hand, heavier than it should have been. Ryan's unit was easy to find. I stood there for a moment with my fingers curled around the cold metal lock, telling myself to breathe, to stay steady, to be strong. Then I unlocked it. The metal door groaned open like a warning. Inside, dust coated most of the furniture we once talked about. Selling a desk, a set of chairs. Old baby clothes from Caleb's newborn days. Things that didn't matter. But in the back corner was a plastic storage bin with a lid. Not dusty. Not untouched. Recently opened. My legs felt weak as I walked toward it. I dragged it into the light, kneeled, and lifted the lid with trembling hands. Inside were objects that didn't belong to me, didn't belong to our home, didn't belong to our family. They belonged to his other life. The first thing I saw was a stack of photographs. Dozens of them. Ryan and Emily together in Parks restaurants in front of a Christmas tree. Some looked years old. Others were recent enough that the little boy I'd seen yesterday appeared in them, smiling cradled in Ryan's arms. My breath hitched. He looked proud. Proud of a life I never knew existed. Under the photos were envelopes, receipts, birthday cards, scribbled notes in handwriting that wasn't mine. A card from the boy that said, "Love you, Daddy." My vision blurred, and beneath everything else was a journal. Black leather, worn edges, familiar handwriting. Ryan's handwriting. My fingers shook as I opened it, and then the truth spilled out page by page. The first entry was dated years ago before Ryan and I got married. He wrote about dating Emily, how he thought she was the one, how the breakup had been messy and unfinished, how she contacted him months into our engagement saying she was pregnant. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. He wrote about panic, fear, guilt, and silence. He wrote that he didn't tell me because he didn't want to lose me. He wrote about trying to end things with Emily after the baby was born, but failing every time because he couldn't abandon his child. There were entries about sneaking money to her, entries about lying to me, entries about birthdays he celebrated with them, entries about the boy's first steps. My heart twisted painfully. He didn't just cheat, he built a family, a secret parallel family. And then another name appeared. Leah. My stomach clenched as I read. She had found out the truth accidentally. She had seen messages, confronted him, threatened him. And then she blackmailed him. At first, she forced him to get her hired at his company. Then she demanded more lunches, gifts, attention. Eventually, she wanted him to be with her romantically. If I don't keep her happy, she'll tell Mia everything he wrote. She wants me to leave my wife. I don't know how to get out of this. Every line felt like a blade. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was trapped, weak, cowardly, willing to betray me again and again to maintain a life built on lies. By the time I reached the last entry dated only weeks ago, I felt strangely calm. Calm in the way a person feels after a natural disaster, standing in the rubble, finally able to see all the destruction clearly. Everything made sense now. The long hours, the mood swings, the strange expenses, the distance, the cologne, the retreat. All of it. He wasn't juggling an affair. He was juggling two women and a blackmailer while trying to keep his secrets from exploding. And the explosion was already happening. I closed the journal. Then I placed it into my handbag along with every photograph, every envelope, every scrap of evidence. I took pictures of each page with my phone. I gathered everything, not because I was going to confront him in rage, but because I was going to confront him in truth. Unavoidable, undeniable truth. By the time I rolled the storage unit door shut, I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't crying. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Whatever came next, I would be the one in control. When Ryan walked through the front door that evening, he looked exhausted. Tie-loose hair, slightly disheveled, the kind of worn-out expression he usually wore after a long day. But when his eyes met mine, something shifted. Maybe it was the way I was standing too still, too calm. Maybe it was the journal on the table between us. Or maybe he finally sensed that the truth he'd been burying was about to claw its way to the surface. "Steph," he said slowly, "everything okay?" I didn't answer. I simply nudged the journal toward him with one finger. The color drained from his face. He didn't even try to play dumb. He didn't reach for some rehearsed excuse or half-hearted smile. He just stared at it like it was a live grenade. Where did you get this?" he whispered. I didn't look away. "Is it true?" He closed his eyes. And in that moment, I knew. Before he admitted anything, before he opened his mouth, before he touched the journal with trembling fingers, I knew it was all true. Every photo, every entry, every betrayal. He started talking in bursts like he couldn't decide which lie to use first before realizing lies were pointless. "It's complicated. You don't understand. I never wanted to hurt you. I panicked." I didn't say a word. Then I told him I followed him to the hotel, to the neighborhood, to Emily's front door. I mounted him I'd seen the boy. I told him I knew about Leah, about the blackmail, about everything. I showed him the photos, the receipts, the text screenshots, the pages of his journal. There was no escape left. Ryan broke. His shoulders fell. His chest shook. Tears streamed down his face, and a wounded, pathetic sound escaped him. "Please," he whispered. "Stephanie, please don't leave me. I'll fix this. I swear. I'll cut them off. I'll do anything. I had never seen him cry this hard. I had never seen him look so small. And if the person he hurt hadn't been me, I might have actually felt sorry for him. But pity isn't forgiveness. I walked to the bedroom and began packing. A bag for me, a bag for Caleb, nothing more. Ryan followed me pleading, stumbling over apologies, promises, explanations. He reached for me once lightly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch me anymore. I stepped away. "You had years," I told him. "Years to fix this. Years to tell me the truth. Years to choose our family. You didn't." He didn't argue. When I closed the door behind me that night, taking Caleb with me, he didn't try to stop me. Maybe deep down he knew stopping me wasn't an option anymore. My parents didn't ask questions when I arrived at their doorstep in tears. My mom just wrapped her arms around me, while my dad took Caleb gently from my arms, leading him inside. The moment I stepped into their living room, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Safety. For the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself cry in a way that felt real and cleansing. Not the silent, desperate kind, but the kind that lets a person begin again. The next morning, I woke up with clarity. Not anger, not confusion, clarity. I called a lawyer, filed for divorce. Then I called HR at Ryan's company and handed them everything: proof of Leah's coercion, proof of Ryan's misconduct, proof of their inappropriate relationship and the abuse of company resources. The fallout was quick. Ryan was fired within a week. Leah was escorted out shortly after. The company wanted to avoid a scandal. They didn't stand a chance. Ryan tried calling me for the first couple of days, messages filled with begging, sobbing, pleading for redemption. But when I calmly repeated the same sentence each time, "We're done, Ryan," he eventually stopped. He didn't fight for custody, didn't threaten legal action, didn't show up unannounced. He was too ashamed, too defeated, too aware of what he'd thrown away. His life collapsed quietly like a building imploding from the inside. While his world crumbled, mine began slowly rebuilding. I found a full-time job to support Caleb and myself, something steady to anchor us. My mom watched Caleb while I worked, spoiling him with homemade soup and new bedtime stories. My dad made sure my car was always in perfect shape, leaving bags of groceries on the counter, just in case. Their home became my sanctuary. Caleb adjusted better than I expected. He didn't understand why Daddy wasn't around as much, but he clung to me with a soft trust that made me stronger every day. I know someday I'll have to explain everything to him, but for now, he just needs love, and he has it. I started therapy too. The first session, I could barely speak without shaking. By the third, I felt my breathing settle for the first time in months. By the fifth, I wasn't crying every day. By the eighth, I wasn't crying every week. The anger still visits me sometimes. The betrayal still stings. But healing isn't linear. It's a messy, uneven journey, and I'm walking it one honest step at a time. There are moments, rare ones, when I think about Ryan's guilt, how he must replay every choice, how he ruined two families, how he lost everything while trying to keep everything. Sometimes I feel pity, but pity is not love. Pity is not forgiveness. Pity is closure, and closure is mine. I don't know what the future looks like for me yet. I don't know when I'll feel ready to trust again. I don't know when the anger will stop flickering inside me. But I do know this: I am finally free. Free from lies, free from secrets, free from the weight of carrying a marriage on my back. And for the first time in a long time, I can breathe without waiting for the next blow. Whatever comes next, whatever life brings, I'll meet it head on, stronger, wiser, and holding my son's hand. Because this story didn't end when my marriage did. It began.